Good morning, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Tuesday, the 4th of January. This morning, I am using a different mug than I usually do. I usually have my blue mug that Rob gave me last year for Christmas. Well, this year he gave me a new mug. Look at that, the comparison. He's dreaming big. He thinks I need a lot of caffeine, I guess. Well, this one I'm not going to be able to carry caffeine in because it would take a whole pot. And even I can't drink that much. And in a tin cup, it cools off pretty quick. But the point of this, I think, isn't so much about drinking coffee. Partly, I think, because it carries on the tradition he started of giving me mugs for Christmas, things that speak to me. But I think this one is important because he told me when he gave it to me, and I looked at it and thought, oh my heavens, what's he telling me about caffeine? That he said to me, actually, the reason I thought of this was because I could picture this in our home when we retire. At Christmas at the front door filled with candy canes, so that when people came to visit, they could take a candy cane with them. And that was such an incredible thing for him to say, because, I'm 50 and will be retiring in probably 15 or so years. He's going to retire from the military in less than 10, and who knows what he'll do then. But we've often talked about our retirement and what we would like it to be. There's that, of course, the realism of what it will probably be. Realistically, we'll both be taking parishes until we're well into our 70s and forced to retire, and then doing what his dad did and continuing to work in our retirement. That's the realistic thing. As priests, we work because we love the work, not because we'll be millionaires when we retire. But at the same time, that's the realistic dream. The realistic reality. That's kind of redundant, but you know what I mean. But there's something else. That when Rob gave me this mug, he reminded me of something else. He reminded me of the dream we both have, that one day in our retirement, we might have a log house with lots of rooms and space for both of us to write and for him to do his carpentry work and work on his models, for him to cook and me to bake, for us to be able to offer hospitality, radical hospitality, where we can greet people and welcome them into our home, invite them to participate in our life, to share with us, to pray with us, to break bread with us, to retreat with us. We hope one day, we pray one day that we will be invited by God to be able to live a life of radical hospitality for others. And that we will have the health and the means and all of those things to do that. And lots of people have said to me, that's unrealistic. You've got to plan smart. That's not going to happen. So, lower your expectations. But then I'm reminded by things like this and by reading scripture that if we lower our expectations, aren't we really showing that we're not having faith in God? I think about people like Abraham and Sarah, and they were living the life they were called to live. They were doing their thing, and they didn't have children, and they had always hoped they would, but they were being faithful. They were doing their thing until 3 men came around to them, and they fed them, and they offered them radical hospitality. They offered them a meal. They offered them a place to stay, and they were then told by these 3 men, these angels, that they would have a child. And that child would become the father of all nations. That the descendants of Abraham would be more than the grains of sand on the beach, the stars in the sky. And of course, Sarah's response was to laugh, because that can't happen. I'm old. I'm past childbearing years. How could that possibly happen? And yet, even when she laughed, even when she doubted, God was faithful to God's plan and said, no, this is what is going to happen. And eventually, through some twists and turns and some unfaithfulness and some second, backup plans and things like that, that did happen. God's will was done. So I'm reminded on a fairly regular basis that if I dream small, then I'm not trusting in God. I'm just putting my trust in myself. And that isn't faithful. I have to dream big. I have to think about those things that I wonder, is God giving this idea to me, or is it of my own thinking? My dream of someday retiring to my log house. I've had it since I was 20 years old. For 30 years, that dream has been in my life. It's changed a little bit, just the details, but the essence and the purpose behind that dream, they're there. They don't change at all. And when I met Rob, and I was concerned one day about telling him about this dream, considering he was a starving student as well, he understood it completely, and I realized that my dream was a dream that God had given him as well, long before we met. So even though there are days when I think to myself, well, my RSPs may not work hard, but I certainly will in my retirement. There are days when I feel, flustered about the future and wonder what good could possibly happen, especially considering everything that's going on in the world around us and blah, 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 all those things. But then I am subtly reminded, and sometimes not so subtly reminded, that God, when God gives us a dream, He's already started the work. We may not understand how we'll get there. We may not understand the ins and outs of it or the other parts or the other people that are needed to meet with us for that dream to happen. But we are called upon to believe in that dream. When I had that dream at 20 years old, when I believed that God gave me that dream, I was on a year off between my first and second year of university. I had squandered my first year of university, and Sister Dolores, I think it was Sister Dolores, who was the principal at Brescia University College, had said to me that she was happy that I was choosing to take a year off school, that if I hadn't chosen to, they would have invited me to do so anyway, because my marks were so abominable that there was some struggle as to whether or not I'd be allowed to come back for second year. So I took that year off, thinking that I was going to never come back to university. And in that year, I was given this dream. God said to me, I think you need to ponder this. I think you need to think on this. And I did for a year. And in that year, I discovered the Group of Seven, and I discovered how much I liked reading the Bible and how important it was to me to understand the history of our country, because I kept up my reading as if I was in school. And by the end of that year, I went back to school, went back to my second year of university, and I worked my butt off, and I got myself into the honors program. And I did better in school than I'd ever done before, considering where I was coming from. And 2 more years after that, I graduated with honors from my English language and literature degree from Brescia College at the University of Western Ontario. That's what it was called at the time. And I didn't know what to do, because a dream I had in my 4th year was to run for president of the Brescia College Student Council, to come back for a 5th year, take a couple of classes that I wanted to take but never had the chance, and because the president usually was a part-time student because of so much work to do. And so I ran for president, something I never would have done before. The person I was didn't have the courage to do that, and yet I believe that God had called me to try out this new dream. And I lost the election by 7 votes. If it had been 5 or less, they would have had a re-election. But I lost the election by 7 votes. I was devastated. But part of that was, because of the timing of the election, I missed the application date for applying to Teachers College. And so I had another year off, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to apply for Teachers College. I'm going to take this time to do some study and to get myself prepared to go away and go to Teachers College. And in that time, I decided, what if I applied to the Masters of Divinity program at Huron, still in London? And so I did. And lo and behold, I got in. And I didn't believe that I wanted to be was called to be a priest. In my first year of my master's degree, I was sure I wanted to be some sort of chaplain, not ordained. But again, partway through the year, God spoke to me and challenged me to think differently. And I went through some difficult discernment process. And when I came out on the other side, I was so glad that the process was difficult, because I felt I'd been tested. And in that testing, I realized I was called to be a priest. Such a different path than I thought I was going to take just a year or 2 or 3 or 4 before. And my life has continued that way. That every time I've gotten to a point, a crossroads in my life, God has thrown something at me that I've never expected. And when that happened, I realized that every time God has given me a new opportunity, that opportunity was always bigger than anything I would have asked for or imagined for myself. So I'm reminded that I need to dream big, that I need to count on that day when this will be filled with candy canes for people who come to visit us at our log home when in our retirement. That when that time comes, I will be able to look back and see the path that God led me on, from like connect the dots from point A to point B to point C. That although it didn't look like a clear cut path to me, God knew what God was doing, and I was simply faithful in following along and believing those things that I didn't know I could believe in. And so I thank Rob for reminding me to dream big, and I thank God for reminding me that things may seem to be heading down one path, but at a fork in the road and some prayerful discernment, that path could turn into a journey I would never have asked for or imagined on my own. Something bigger and greater and more beautiful. Some more experiences of Jesus in my life that I never would have had if I'd chosen my own way. So as we go about our day, as we enter into this new year, I invite you to dream big, to pray big, to be ready when God says you can go on the carousel, the little dinky carousel that goes around in circles, or you can go with me on this journey across a land you've never seen before. Which one are you up for? So which one are you up for? I think if you really look into your heart, you know you're ready for that journey that's going to take you places you'd never even guessed about, but that God needs you to take. God bless you as you figure out your journey with God. May your discernment be filled with peace and hope and challenge and wonder and surprises, just as mine has been. Have a great day. God bless you, and I will see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachel. Remember, pray and dream big, folks.